Hey everyone, it's Holly Rustick here with Grant Writing and Funding, and I am here today with Vanessa Williams. All right, not the singer, but a very important person. And we're going to be talking today. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce her, but first off, I just want to say thank you so much for listening and for joining. If you're listening to this on the podcast, please also check out our YouTube channel at Grant Writing and Funding, and you will find the video as well, so you can see her beautiful face. We can go ahead and talk about 501c3. So we're really going to get into it today. But before I go on, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce her. So Vanessa is a lawyer with an economics and business background, and particular experience representing governmental and quasi-governmental entities, and that's why we're talking to her today. Does a lot of nonprofit work. Drawing on this regulatory experience, she also advises businesses in all aspects from startup to sale. Vanessa often acts as outside counsel to companies in litigation and administrative proceedings. She is able to navigate her way around any legal issue with superior research skills and attention to detail, and then communicate that clearly to her clients so they have the information and assurance they need when making critical decisions. So Vanessa is licensed to practice law in Guam, California, and the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And she has also served, what really makes her special is she's just not behind the scenes academic on this, she's in it. She's in it. So she served on the boards of ANZ Guam, that is a bank, Australia Bank, right? Australia New Zealand Bank?
It's a ANZ Guam, so it's owned by a Australia New Zealand Bank, the group, but it is the local bank. So it's a locally chartered bank.
Perfect. Okay. And she's also the Agenya Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, the board there, the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, where she's also served as president, the Rotary Club of Tumon Bay, and Guam Animals in Need. So she's in the mix, totally in the mix. I love it. And we've worked a lot together with nonprofits and on nonprofits. So I just here you go. Here's your phone. You got her bio. So, anyways, yeah, we've been talking, and a lot of times I'll ask Vanessa for just some kind of feedback, so I know what to tell my clients as well from a lawyer's perspective. And I have so many of you guys that are reaching out and wanting information on how to start a 501c3, right? And a lot of times I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and bring on an expert in the legal field that has nonprofits coming to her all the time to help develop the forms and submit the paperwork, right?
Right.
So yeah, so can you just kind of, I know I have your bio, but can you kind of just like tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, well, I think that I kind of stumbled into the nonprofit world. I was actually, my specialty is business law, so it really is more like for-profit and corporate and commercial law. But once I moved here to Guam, where I'm from, and getting involved with all the civic organizations is when people would say, hey, you're a lawyer, right? Like maybe you can help us. And the first step, well, just that was kind of how I got started. And they would just have an idea, and it'd be an idea of, okay, this is something I want to do. I mean, most of them, people would say, and I meet in the nonprofit community, but then they saw a need that they felt needed to be filled or served, and just like, how do I do it? And I'm like, well, okay, so let me take a look at it. And then I realized at the outset, it's like all of my other business clients starting.
It is a business, right?
Right.
It's just a nonprofit.
It's an organization. It's a corporation that you have to form. And so in that respect, it's very similar. And I was like, oh, I know that. And then the stuff that I, got to know or examine and then experience as I did this a lot is the IRS side and the form side, and it's the tax-exempt status. The whole point why you want to be being a nonprofit. And so that's the stuff that I kind of had the on-the-job learning for. Okay. And so I guess I've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years, maybe 6 years. And yeah, and then it's become this whole other supplement to my practice, where and here we are.
Yay. Okay. So you've been having, how many people do you have per year that come to you, or has it increased throughout the last 6 years?
It's definitely increased. So like I said, it was basically friends, acquaintances or colleagues in some respect, and they were coming to me then. The big one was the women's chamber.
Yeah.
We were like, okay, we can do this. And I'm like, wait, I know how to do this. I just helped some other people and then did that. But I'd say I get At least one a month.
Wow.
I mean, it's not a whole lot, but I'm Guam is small, but I get at least one nonprofit inquiry a month. Not all of them are just the startups,
right.
you know, the nonprofit formation, but most of them are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. And as you kind of develop this, have you just kind of developed operational manuals or systems that you can easily kind of work through the process of helping people get started up?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have my questions where I'm surveying them. It's like, okay, do you know what you want to do? What your purpose is? Can you define that clearly?
Right.
And who are the people that are going to be your organizers? Kind of similar questions of when you form any other business. Okay, what is your purpose? Except we got to make sure that yours is going to be recognized as a legitimate tax-exempt purpose by the IRS and the local taxing authority, the DRT, Department of Revenue and Taxation. But what was your question again?
Okay. Okay, if I was coming to you and I'm like, I want to start a nonprofit, right? What would be the first thing that you would say to me?
Okay, what's your nonprofit for?
Okay.
Yeah. So as we want to clear, because people would say, I want to start a nonprofit, and I've actually gotten this a lot where they say, they think that they can form any company or any business and that they can somehow apply for nonprofit status. But you have to qualify to be nonprofit. I mean, the nonprofit status under 501c3 or 501c4 or 5 or 6 or any of those, there's over a dozen classifications for nonprofits. Those are defined in the law and the Internal Revenue Code statute by the IRS, right? And so unless you fall into one of those categories already, you can't be a nonprofit. Now, 501c3 is very general. It's like religious, charitable purposes. But you have to, you can't, there's restrictions. You can't do any lobbying activity or political activity. Some of the other 501cs you might, but not 501c3, which is common. But anyway, the point being is, I asked them the question of, okay, what is it that you want to do? Make sure they actually have, assuming it's a 501c3, charitable or religious purpose to the organization to see if they'll even qualify. Because if they're not gonna, if they're not gonna qualify off the bat, then we're not gonna waste our time diving into the details of their application.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I do have a lot of people that come to me as well, and they'll say, hey, I need to start up my business, I'm looking for grants, so I want to start a 501c3.
Yeah.
So I can fund whatever I'm doing.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not really how it works, you know, necessarily. Like, maybe, but let's go a little deeper into that, you know, with them, because otherwise, if you're just doing it so you can have a revenue generating income for yourself, that's usually not a 501c3.
Right.
So,
yeah, you can't be the charity.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people, that's what they think.
Yeah.
And yes, there are grants, some individual grants available out there for fellowships and that sort of thing.
Right.
But as a 501c3, it's really more of a community work. Like, are you going to, even if you have some kind of program income coming in, like through grants or fundraisers or products or whatever, will you take that and give it back into your organization and into the community, right? So
exactly.
That's interesting that you brought that up, because I also get a lot of those kind of questions. So that's good for clarifying this. So you guys, if you want to start a 501c3, you really want to make sure that you're doing it as a benefit for the community, and it's not to like start your own entrepreneurship or something like that. Right? Yeah,
exactly.
So that's simple. And so what are some other things that you really see, like, is it just stumbling over the paperwork, or do people just kind of want that stamp of approval from a lawyer's eyes looking over their work, or do you get both?
I get both. You can get anything off the internet, right? And truthfully, the articles and the bylaws of your organization, you look at them, sometimes it's a few pieces of paper. It doesn't seem very difficult or very hard, but there are key phrases that they're looking for with the IRS or Rev and Tax when they're examining your articles and your bylaws to make sure you are consistent with a tax-exempt organization. And so you've got to be careful. And that's something I don't think you would anyone would see. You wouldn't just Google articles or bylaws and then they'll tell you that, or you'll know that. It's something you know from looking at the statute and looking at the regulations and And then also just experience, especially locally.
Yeah.
Things that you just learn because you've done it so many times, or we've done it so many times.
Right.
But I do get some people who are just like, oh, can you just look at this and do this? And that's never really worked out.
Oh, really?
Because they think that, well, we're doing it on the cheap. We don't have any money. We're a nonprofit, right? We don't have any money. And so can you just take a look? But then they file it and they think, oh, we're formed. You file your articles and your bylaws with the appropriate licensing authority. In Guam's case, it's revenue and taxation, and in any other state, it's like their business divisions, whatever they call them, or commerce authorities. And then they think, okay, I'm formed. And so technically, you formed a corporation, but it's not a nonprofit yet because it hasn't been granted tax-exempt status by the IRS, or in Guam's case, the Department of Revenue and Taxation. So a lot of people don't realize that, and then they end up doing things piecemeal. And then they're like, and so those people who are kind of don't want to pull the trigger and form the attorney-client relationship, or hire us, they say, come back, and they're like, oh, well, now we did this form, and can you look at this? And I'm like, yeah, it'd be a lot simpler if you just let me do it, or from the get. So I guess the mistake is assuming just doing it that way, piecemeal. It ends up taking more time, and probably more time and money that way.
Yeah.
As opposed to getting all your ducks in a row. So now, what I do with my clients is we have our own checklist, and I have basically a questionnaire. It's like, give me all this information, then we'll look for it, and then we'll go through the checklist, and then these are all the things that you're going to have to do or provide to me, so that it's a smooth process and that we don't get denied.
Right, because that's important.
Right.
Yeah, and can you just name off some of those items that they need to have in that checklist?
Right. So you're going to need all of the organizers. So even though they're not technically shareholders, they're which you would have with a normal corporation, they would just be your organizers. And those are the people who are responsible for getting it off the ground. Mm-hmm. And so you need their personal information. They're just regular name, address, all of that. But on the application, for 501c3, it's a 1023 form for both the IRS and locally, because we use that as well. You're going to need your financial information for your organization. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when you're starting up, this is actually really easy because you have no financial information.
Right.
So it's actually great applying then. This is also something I've learned, because you don't necessarily, if you wait, which some do, then you're going to have to actually report your actual financials for the last 5 years. And
they won't be tax exempt, right? They will not be tax exempt, or can they be?
Going back 5 years, I'm not sure. This is where I punt it over to a CPA or a tax person. But I don't know retroactively how that works, because honestly, I don't even know how they were operating without filing first.
Right.
Well, anyway, I want to get back to that point because it's kind of important. Yeah. But you need your financial information. What I've seen a lot is if you come late in the game and they're applying with the IRS, and they've been operating for 5 years already, what's kind of surprising, not surprising, is that they don't even know it. And it's because I think the same reason with nonprofits, especially small, when it's an individual or just a small group and they're starting off, they don't have really clean books,
right?
And they don't know all that stuff, and so you're doing twice the work. You're going back and you're cleaning everything up to make sure you're reporting accurately, and getting that information together. When you start off, you're just projecting,
right?
And you're supposed to just give a projection. I'm going to do these 3 programs, and we anticipate raising this much money, and we anticipate spending this much money, and that's it.
Right.
So it's a lot simpler that way. Right. Would be the main thing. Other things are conflict of interest policies that we do by board resolution that we attach to the application. But I think that the critical thing is kind of the finances. But the reason, so going back to how does that even possible, right? Because have you been operating without paying taxes? What's been going on?
Right.
So I think this might be, I'm licensed in California, but I've only done a little bit of work in California. All of my practice, my entire career has been here on Guam. And here on Guam,
although people can hire you online, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. So, and the work that I've done there has been really more one-off transactional stuff. But all the nonprofits I've worked with have been here on Guam. And in Guam, the tax relationship is kind of complicated because we follow the IRS's tax code. In other states, you have your own local tax code, and then you have your state tax code. You might even have a county taxes and municipality taxes, and then you have the federal tax. Here, we just have the IRS code.
Right.
But we use that it's called a mirror tax code. So on Guam, when it was organized, the government was organized, and we needed some taxing authority, Congress said, you know what, you guys can, you have the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, will be your tax code. And wherever you see United States of America or the federal government, just substitute Government of Guam. And your local taxing authority will substitute itself instead and in place of the IRS. And this isn't for everything. Like we still pay some certain federal taxes. Like I pay self-employment taxes and into Social Security and Medicare. But in terms of regulations and granting tax-exempt status, we do that locally. So we can do that locally and never actually do it with the IRS. As opposed to in the States, you apply with the IRS for your tax-exempt status and then you register with your state. We kind of do it backwards. Right. So I think that's how it's been happening, that so many of the nonprofits that I've worked with have actually gotten their tax-exempt status locally. You apply with the revenue tax because they're really the only enforcer. You don't have to worry about that. And then they realize that's the big thing. When they realize they want to apply for a federal grant and they're not eligible because they're not federally recognized. Right. And so I think that's what's been happening and why I've encountered the organizations applying later and having their have to look back at their finances 5 years back as opposed to doing projection. That was kind of my whole point was just how does that even happen? Well, I think that's how it happens.
I also see it happen on a very small scale, and this was something that was interesting to me. Someone said, no, you can retroact because, in order to pay for your filing, right, for your 501c3, the federal government is around $800.
Right.
Locally, it's about $400 on Guam, but it changes wherever you live. And so people will do fundraisers. Our nonprofits that have formed will do fundraisers to get the money to pay for the filing fees. So they have a little bit of income, and they're saying, well, how can we make this tax exempt? And one person had spoken to, they said, oh, you can retroact that part of it. Oh. But I'm not really sure. So you're not sure either.
No, I don't know. But
question for me right now.
I can, so as a lawyer, I can go and I can figure it out. So I don't know everything off the top of my head. I research and, I just go, I think it's a license to know where to look.
Right, yeah. So, that's interesting to figure that out. But, usually it's not too much money, so I don't think, if you want to raise that much money, it's okay. People will still give it to you, even if they're not getting tax-exempt, whatever. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but so that's really interesting. So we're looking at bylaws, articles, their projected budget or their previous budget that they had, right? Yeah. And then you're also looking at their bios for their board members,
right?
And just what are you doing, your mission and your vision and all of that fun stuff, right? So they have that kind of lined up. Then they can come to you or to any lawyer, right? And they can really kind of advance through that. Now, do they need to come to a lawyer? Is this something?
No, they don't have to. I mean, and it's not required. And then I think that other people can prepare. Well, anyone can prepare. Anyone can draft their own articles and their own bylaws. There's just a chance that it's going to be kicked back, or you're going to have problems with it, just because it's not their expertise, right?
Absolutely.
And
it's
that can be said for anything. And anyone can file the forms with the IRS and Revenue Tax. And even, actually, Revenue Tax being the local Department of Revenue and Taxation, they'll give you, they have their own checklists. And they'll say, okay, these are all the forms we need.
Right.
And anyone can do that. And you can actually, completing those forms, I know accountants do that, so I guess it's not prohibited, like it's not the practice of a law per se. So it doesn't even have to be a lawyer if, someone's helping you with that. It just makes it easier.
Right,
just,
as long as they have the experience with nonprofit, I think, for filing, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the big thing. 1023. Now you have the long form and you have the 2-page short form.
The easy form.
Right, the easy, yeah. So as long as you're projecting not to get more than 50K in 1 year, I believe, right, you can do the easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people starting up, I'm like, just do that one. Right. Like, what do you recommend?
Yeah, totally. If you can, do it. Not everyone can. Like, it's only for 501c3s, right? So if you're like a business league or chamber of commerce, you can't use that form. Also, if you're a religious organization, you cannot use that form. So churches, like, they can't avail of the 1023 easy because those are probably the most heavily scrutinized. But yeah, if you can, if your vision and your purpose of your charitable organization qualifies to use that form, use that form.
Yeah, okay, great. And I love that, and talking about, Vanessa was talking about the 501c6, I believe, or other kinds of 501cs, right? So if you have a membership, if you're like big on a membership, right, or some kind of like a chamber, then yeah, they would not necessarily fall underneath the 501c3, so that is important too, when you're kind of looking at what do you want to form.
Yeah, that's another, I guess, common misconception that I get in people, because I've had other potential business leagues and civic organizations and our community organizations, and they want to not only support their members, but they want to engage in political activity. They want to maybe form like a political action committee or endorse candidates, and you can't do that with a 501c3, but you can do that under other 501cs. Yeah, so people say, I want to form a 501c3. I'm like, what do you want to do? Okay, so you want to be a nonprofit, or you want to form this, but it's not necessarily a 501c3.
Right, it's not interchangeable.
Yeah, and so that's something, I guess, in theory, you could encounter is doing it yourself. You know, if you don't know how to look at these regs or interpret them and these statutes, and then you file a 1023 EZ form and you're trying to form a church that's going to support a political candidate, you're totally screwed. You should have hired a lawyer. Should have paid a professional. But and I mean, we're kind of laughing, but you know, people, there is a lot of like, oh, why don't I just do that?
Right. Well, I mean, it's just not knowing. It is a whole new world. And that's why we're doing this today, so you guys get a glimpse on how to do, like, if you're really thinking, what do I need to form? How do I need to move forward? Just like easy steps and what to kind of know before you go forward, right? So I think that's important to get someone that has the expertise, and even people come to me and they can consult with me too to get some of this information. And of course, I always like to have a lawyer, kind of look it over, or just talk to my lawyer friends. But the other thing too is kind of banking on that. You are an expert. I imagine, these nonprofit startups, they don't have a lot of cash maybe, right, in the beginning. And they're asking you, and I know you kind of mentioned they're friends, but and I think the common misconception is that lawyers should just do this pro bono for nonprofits. And I kind of want to break that stereotype because I believe that you're providing them your time, your expertise, and that it's worth something, right? But at the same time, is it a super huge amount, and how can they kind of budget for that?
Right. Yeah, no, it is. I get that too. And I actually did so much pro bono work because I felt the same way. I'm like, oh, they're a nonprofit, or they have this charitable purpose, or they believe in this. That sounds good to me. I want to help them out. And what I found along the way, I knew it would take time, and time is money. I trade, hours for dollars, my billable time. But I came to appreciate it actually takes a lot more time and effort than most of my business clients.
Oh, wow.
Because my business clients, I mean, if you're trying to get recognized as a tax-exempt organization, you're going to have a lot more I's to dot and T's to cross, and you're going to be more heavily scrutinized by the government, which means more forms, more information, more verifications. And that's something that I don't necessarily have to do with the business clients. Starting a business is very easy. Of course, running a successful business is a whole another story, but that's not my job. My job is just to help get them started, or formation in terms of the startups. So for a business, I can apply for, incorporate them, or form an LLC or a partnership, whatever kind of entity they want. And it's basically, whatever you guys want to do, you can do. And we'll go apply for it. We'll get you your business license, and you're on your way. Kick you out the door, and don't forget to talk to your tax person. And that's it. But and usually with the business clients, they're a little more prepared. They have a business plan. You know, they've been they're thinking about getting financing. They're anticipating that scrutiny, so it's a little bit easier. They have a lot of the information ready to go. And I feel like with a lot of the nonprofits I've worked with, they don't have a business plan.
Right.
You know?
They just have passion.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They do. And they have passion, lots of passion, which is
Yeah.
obviously so crucial. Yeah. But that whole business sense, you know, the really rigid planning sense is not there. So I kind of had to tease it out. And so that ends up taking a lot of time going back and forth and following up. And maybe it's the whole aspect too, like with the business, they know, okay, well, as soon as I start my business, I'm going to be making all this money, right?
Yeah. And
with the nonprofits, maybe the incentive is not there. So usually I'm dealing with a few people, you know, it's a group of organizers, and sometimes it's hard to get accountability. That's one thing. Get the information from everybody. And when they realize, I think some people are like, oh, can you just form me a nonprofit?
Right.
You know,
but you're like, I need
since
information.
I'm paying you all this money, shouldn't, you know, you just come back to me with this nice, like, here's your nonprofit.
Yeah.
But I don't know the facts, so I have to get the information from them. And since there's so much more information, it ends up being a lot more work. So I actually realized, like, not only should I be charging for this, or do I have to charge for this because I can't afford to do this pro bono anymore. I actually, it costs more than just a regular business filing.
Right, absolutely. That's very simple compared to the 501c3 process.
So it is, I mean, it's literally a lot more work there, and there's a lot more paper to show for it too. Yeah. It's like, this is all those things we have to do for you.
Right. But that's such an interesting perspective too. I never thought about that because, a business person, they're taking a bigger risk possibly, like quitting their job and starting their business, so they put a lot more thought and just
things more skin in the game.
Yeah. And nonprofits, a lot of times it's, you know, they're not expecting it to be their full-time jobs right away. It's a side project. It's, you know, it's something that is a good idea, right? And then they want to form it, so they just go, and then I can see how that would take a lot of time going through the process with them, right? Yeah. So it's almost like you're giving them like business school in a way for a little bit, you know, to kind of get that information and get a plan.
Right.
You know, so that's really interesting. So nonprofits, now they come to you. What is one of the most common misconceptions that you face, or one of the biggest challenges that you have?
Okay, common misconception. I mean, I think the biggest one, we kind of touched on it already, is thinking that anything can be a nonprofit. Okay. It's just a matter of applying for that status. And not anything can be a nonprofit. It's actually very, restricted what can be a nonprofit. I think the other thing is not realizing that it's a tax recognition status, not necessarily you don't just form, there's a business side where you form like a partnership or an LLC or corporation, and you say, okay, check the box, I want to be a nonprofit corporation. A lot of people don't understand that you're actually applying to a taxing authority for that. So you're forming a corporation. It's just a corporation. And then you're applying to the taxing authority to be recognized as a not-for-profit corporation. And so that's where you'll see the similarities in startup, come. And people just don't realize that. They don't realize that that's the big component, and that's who's going to be scrutinizing you.
Okay, so once they're formed, they get it, their letter from the IRS that you always need to attach with your grants, and so keep that. Right? But then what? Do they have to come every year? They have to file something, like, because this is a taxation kind of, thing? So locally,
you have to publish your I think it's your P&L in the paper. To just kind of put on to public notice, this is what's happening, and file annually a report with the government, but you don't actually have to pay taxes. Yeah.
So you're just showing them the income. So even if you had a lot of income coming in, you don't have to be.
You have to show them where it went.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You're saying, well, this is where it went. At a certain point, you're going to be audited. Either whether it's by the taxing authority or whether you have your own, independent audit if you're making a ton of money. But yeah, just. Okay. publishing your financial statements in the paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for those of you too, if you're making any more than $750,000 per year in federal funds, you do have to have an audit, so an external audit. So that's important to know. But yeah, so they have to file every year. They have to stay on top of it, right? But what about? Okay, so that's good. So they're kind of like, now they're in the groove, right? But what about if you have a business? So this might be and I have a lot of people also ask me this. Okay, they have a business, it's successful, but they want to do something with the business that would be more of a nonprofit arm, right? So would you recommend that they have to start up an entirely new business, or can it be, how does that work? Because I have a lot of people come to me.
Yeah, and a lot of big businesses do that.
Large corporations.
Right. And they start a foundation, and then they donate a lot to that foundation, and that becomes a charitable contribution, and then they're able to use that money for charitable purposes, and then it's completely tax protected or sheltered. So yeah, you would have to start another entity. You can't commingle them, but you're basically going to you get the benefit of it. Where the money's going to come from, and that money's going to be, you get to deduct that. So if it's from your business and it's to a 501c3, you can that's a tax deduction so you're not paying it from yourself, like the business owner. And then once it's with the nonprofit, then they don't have to pay taxes on it.
Okay, so that's great. So if you have a large corporation or a larger business, or you just want to be able to do something more, right?
Yeah.
From the nonprofit point of view, you can open a nonprofit, and then you can give monies to your nonprofit to help with the community,
even if you have a small business, you can do that. But it's usually super rich people.
Well, that's the next question, actually. That's a good segue is, do you have to give a certain amount? Because I gave a certain amount last year in charitable purposes, and they said, well, it needs to be at like 18,000 or something ridiculous, and I was like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? To really get the full purpose of tax-exempt or tax deductions.
Oh, you mean your individual contributions, right? Yeah, I think that comes actually down to whether you're itemizing or you are taking the standard deduction. So those just went up. I think so there's no longer, and I'm not a tax professional. I'm a lawyer, and I always refer my people to the tax people. So there's my disclaimer. But I think that's what it comes down to. Because unless your charitable contributions, and that sounds about right, for your tax status, with a personal exemption or a personal deduction with a one dependent. That's maybe, I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, well, I was doing it for my business. For my business. To say, if I give this much from my business to this nonprofit, nonprofits, then what is the, any kind of tax, do I get any tax deductions?
Oh, okay. So
that might be a CPA question.
It might be a CPA question because I actually am not aware of any restrictions on a business. If they make a contribution to a charitable organization, then they can deduct that.
They should get all of that deduction.
Alternatively, there's other ways. They could be marketing expenses. A lot of companies do that. And the other thing might be, again, be wary because on the side for donating, again, the difference between 501c3 and some of the other 501cs, like for example, to the 501c6, these business leagues, those are not, they're tax-exempt organizations, but for people donating to them, that's not a charitable contribution. That they don't get to deduct that as a donation. It's only if it's to a 501c3. So 501c6, we make that disclaimer. It's like, okay, and I have to tell my clients, go ahead and tell them, because sometimes you'll see on the forms like, this is a tax deductible contribution. Yeah. That's not true if you're not a 501c3. Wow. If you're a 501c4, so I've seen 5 or a 501c6, it's not. But they can claim it as a marketing expense, that's what they're putting their...
so if you are one of those, not a 501c3, but the other one, right? So for instance, the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, 501c6. But, going out there asking for sponsors, for different events, that sort of thing, because it is a nonprofit. What incentive then is there for those companies if they're not, they're donating large amounts, but they're not getting that tax deduction?
Well, it's still deductible expense. Okay, it's just not a charitable contribution.
Okay.
So they can still deduct it from their expense side, and that, decreases your overall income.
Right.
So that's where it plugs in. And I feel like that's really just an accounting thing.
Yeah, it is.
because you're still getting the benefits somehow. The money's still
Right.
not being deducted. You're still not paying taxes on that because you deduct it. And then, of course, there's all the passion reasons, right? You know, you feel good about doing all of that. And I think it is, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's tricky to call it a marketing expense. It really is. You know, a lot of companies want
you
to
get your logo and
demonstrate their
stuff.
their socially responsible corporate citizens, right? That's really important for a lot of companies, and a lot of the bigger ones have budgets for that. And donating to a 501c6 like a Chamber of Commerce, it still falls within that. So
great.
They should have lots of incentives.
Right? Not just about the money.
Yeah.
Right? But so you really have to talk about your mission and vision and connect it with the corporates to kind of get them to give to you as well. So this has been great. Do you have any other 501c3 or 501c whatever, information or kind of things that you can give to the audience who might be just growing their nonprofit or thinking about starting one?
I'd say, well, I don't know if I have any more legal tidbits, but just in working with them, I'd say probably the most awesome thing you could do, which I don't see a lot, is treat it like a business in the beginning. And in terms of doing the business planning. And even if it's, you're not, and maybe in a business plan, you're doing your 5-year projections and you're trying to see when you're going to turn a profit and make buku bucks, even if that's not the point, right? Because this is not a big entrepreneurial activity. This is a social venture. Having some type of business planning to see where you go, because then that's the next thing. You form, and then it's like, okay, well, now what? We don't have any money.
Right.
How are we going to get the money to do all the things that we want to do?
Right.
And that's like, any other business. How are you going to make the money?
Right. And I love that, actually, because that's another thing, too, that I see if they just did the business planning. Because in a business plan, you need to do your market research, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing with nonprofits. It's you might have this great idea, but probably maybe 5 other people in your community already had that great idea, and they've already started a nonprofit doing exactly what you want to do, right? So a lot of times you just don't see those nonprofits, you don't know they're there, but it doesn't mean they're not there and they're not making a difference. Right. So I always say, well, are there other people doing it? Or if somebody comes to me with an idea and I already know there's 3 other nonprofits that are serving that same demographic, I'm like, partner with them, go serve on their board, see what they're doing.
Right.
Now, if you're filling a different gap, go for it, open a nonprofit. You know what I mean? If you really see there's a gap in the need in the community, and there's something that you can do, then go ahead and do that. But if you're just thinking this is needed, but already, there's things going on, then you're not going to be as competitive getting the funding, because those nonprofits may already be getting the funding, be that grants or fundraisers or from corporates, right? Yeah. And you might not be able to meet the numbers. Like if you want to serve homeless people, and there's already 3 other homeless shelters, and they're not maxed out every night, on beds, right? You know what I mean? It's not saturated. Then it may be that you should just volunteer for them. You know what I mean? So it's always going back to that market research. Yeah. So I do like that you touch on that, because that's a great thing. Just kind of make sure that there is a need, and and then form your business plan, because it really is a business.
Right.
And then see how you can move forward. So that's great.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a great tip.
I mean, because you don't want to do something that's already, or you think that there's a need, and maybe there isn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe they just need someone existing just needs a little more help.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot. It's like, oh, I want to go serve, and I'm like, well, did you know that so-and-so is already doing it? And so-and-so's, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, go check them out. If your idea is still very different and there's still a need, maybe you can move forward, but otherwise you might just want to partner with them. Yeah. So you save all the hassle of everything. All right, so if you're looking at forming a 501c3, then make sure that you have your ducks in a row, so to speak, right? Make sure you can kind of at least figure out what your goals are, what your budget would be, what the need is, who's going to be the founders, right? Yeah. You need to have so many people. And some of these documents you can find in the online membership on grant writing and funding, so at least to get you started. And once again, my disclaimers, I am not a lawyer, so I'm talking to one. So it's also great to have that lawyer to talk to as well. And that's where you could go to Vanessa. So can you tell people where they can find you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm online, my vlwilliamslaw.com. I'm on Facebook, the Law Office of Vanessa Williams. For those locally, my office is here in Hagåtña, 671-477-1389.
Great.
It's something I enjoy doing. I really I've got down. It's a lot more fun when you know what you're doing.
Yep. Otherwise it's overwhelming.
Yeah, and it's great. I love working. I love the field of law I'm in. I love doing business admin law, and then this supplementing it with nonprofit law. I do love the passion part.
Yeah.
And maybe because of what I do, it's a little more dry, and it's like, okay, well, this is the legalese side, but I do like working with hearing people's passion and their goals and their visions and their dreams. I'm like, okay, well, let me help you so we can make this a reality, and it's fun for me. I really do enjoy it.
Okay, and just one more question before we sign up. Okay, cost-wise, is there kind of any mid-range, or cost range for this type of work? Is it all over? It just depends.
I don't know. It's really hard to say an average cost for almost any, in legal work. I know that it can run anywhere. And like I said, at one point I was doing it for free.
Right.
I was doing it pro bono, and that was definitely too little. Now what I do, my rate right now is $12.50, which I think is really cheap. But I still, maybe it'll go up later.
Yeah, that is really low.
Because I do like working with them, and I understand the challenges, and it's my community too, and I really do care about all of our NGOs here. But it's $12.50, and then I'll do the formation for them, which means doing the articles, the bylaws, making sure they're going to be compliant and pass the tests with IRS and Rev and Tax.
Yeah.
And then I will do the Form 1023 if they're a 501c3, or Form 1023 Easy. With the IRS and Rev and Tax. So I will apply for the tax exemption at both federally and locally.
But that does not include the filing fees.
Not the filing fees. Those are just the fees for my time, my office's time. It's a fixed fee, which is great. Usually, lawyers charge by the hour. I charge hourly for most things. But in terms of this, I have it down to kind of a science. So I know how much time I'm going to devote to it. And it's just usually more about getting cooperation from the client and getting the information from them. But yeah, we apply for them. We get their EIN. We apply for the business license exemption, the tax exemption, both with the IRS and Rev and Tax, and we get them going. And then and say, okay, here you are. Go open your banking accounts and good luck.
So I
can get them all the way there.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people, I know in the mainland, it's a little higher, I do believe, generally. But it's not to say you can't, if you know a lawyer, you could ask, and some lawyers do offer pro bono.
Yeah.
But I would just advise, don't expect that all the time. And if you have that, you're going to have to go by their timeline and not yours necessarily if you want to get your nonprofit off the ground right away, right?
Yeah.
So they might say, I can do a pro bono, but I've got other people that are paying me, so that's going to take 6 months.
Right, that's another thing too, is I know that I've talked to so many people. That's a big thing too, I should mention, is I've encountered so many people where they're like, well, we've been trying to form a nonprofit for the last year, or the last 6 months, the last year, last 2 years, and I'm like, we can do it in, a few weeks.
Yeah. It can be a very quick
it can be very fast.
You have the information.
You're right. Yeah. If you have the information, you know what you're doing, you know where to go, and you know when to do it.
Yeah, so it's really good. So consultant expert if you can. Otherwise, if you do go pro bono, that's fantastic, but it might make you wait a little bit longer than you want it to, or just make sure your relationship is healthy. All right, well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you can find Vanessa on Facebook,
Facebook, LinkedIn, online.
All right. And I'll put the show notes in on grantwritingandfunding.com on the episode, so you can definitely find Vanessa there, and I will have some links to her services. All right.